Hey there, my name is Eric. I am an aspiring meteorologist working my way towards my atmospheric science degree. The date is October 4th, 2025, and we're going to take a look today just at local US weather and whether or not we're going to be seeing some cool weather coming in here soon, which is what we've all been hoping for. I'd be grateful if you could be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing, and if you do subscribe, remember to turn on notifications with that little bell icon next to the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on the latest weather news, as well as some other silly gaming content and other things if you're interested in that, but mostly weather content. Unlike my usual videos, this is just going to be a local weather analysis. I've been doing mostly tropical because that's kind of my biggest interest in weather. However, I do want to start shifting more to these dedicated videos for local weather, especially when severe weather gets here, as well as winter weather. So those videos will probably start being separated, unless it's during the peak of hurricane season when that's kind of the hottest topic. Then I'll probably combine them. But this is my first dedicated local weather video. We're going to start off by talking about what we're working with right now, present day. So a few things to talk about. Nothing too significant, but kind of interesting, I guess you could say. Right now, the most notable precipitation activity we're seeing in the U.S. is off to the west, and that's associated with a low pressure system as well as a remnant frontal boundary. This is actually bringing some mixed precipitation in those blue areas. You can see especially Montana and Wyoming and Idaho, and there are actually some severe thunderstorms currently occurring here along Nebraska, along the borders of Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. Because of this particular setup here, we have a bit of some actually pretty significant troughing going on here. This upper level flow is allowing colder air aloft to move, as well as allow for more rising motion in this general area especially. And then there is warm air advection going on, so that is actually triggered the current events in that region have triggered a severe mesoscale discussion. This has actually just been added with recent developments. This was not anticipated. The concern lies mostly with heavy wind as well as hail. Tornadoes do not pose a threat in this situation. If this were something we'd see earlier in the year, this would most likely be a tornado event. So they don't actually have a severe weather outlook for this area, but there is a 40% chance of issuance of a watch for it, which means you're pretty far from what constitutes an actual severe weather event. You can see just west of Cheyenne, we do have some summoning thunderstorms here, and there is actually a special weather statement. So generally in this area, as well as areas of Montana and the Dakotas, we have some small squall lines popping up along that jet streak. Most of the east and central United States for today are dominated by high pressure and are not experiencing notable weather. Remnant moisture from Imelda last week, before it took off to the northeast, did leave behind some tropical moisture that is currently allowing for some scattered thunderstorms across the Gulf coastal plains, especially in Florida and Louisiana. There is a low pressure system here, and actually some signaled tropical activity that triggered a designation and watch area by the National Weather Service. As of now, it is no longer being monitored. That was anticipated to move northwest into the Florida Panhandle, but as of now, it doesn't look like something formidable. There is also another area that they are still actively watching in the Central Gulf, but that has a very low chance of forming into anything tropical. Moving forward from today, Saturday, going into Sunday, and then into the week, that shortwave trough, or the jet streak, is going to move forward all the way towards the East Coast, and by Thursday it'll pretty much be off of the East Coast, probably by Friday, if anything. This is permitting some relatively cooler air, but It does not look like it's going to be strong enough to penetrate the south, and this looks like more of a case of a cold air mass that thought it could, rather than a cold air mass that could. Pretty much loses steam by the time it makes it to the plains. Probably another trough goes into the east by the 10th, which will probably cool things off there, especially along the east coast. Now, you'll notice something kind of unfortunate here, and now labeling it as unfortunate will, I guess, depend on whether or not you like hotter weather. But in the Midwest, especially, and throughout the plains, you're actually well above average temperature for this time of the year. Some places are 33 degrees above average temperature, especially up near the Dakotas and in far northwest Minnesota. That's because of that high pressure that's dominating most of this half of the United States. And you can see, even with that trough moving in, that holds. It breaches a bit into Minnesota and the plains, but it does not last long, and it doesn't make it very far south, and most of us are still going to be dealing with some pretty relatively warm weather. And that also unfortunately means that for me as well, here in southeast Texas, we're actually on the 12th expected to be 13 degrees above average temperature for that date. That is disappointing, but unfortunately this does happen some October. Sometimes the heat is just so stubborn, it doesn't want to give, and we can't really enjoy our spooky month with as much cool weather as we would hope. But fortunately for those of you in the West, it is going to be looking quite a bit cooler, and there will be a pretty good deluge of dry air there for very briefly on the 6th, Monday, and then in the plains going into early next week, but it'll heat up pretty quickly. As I said, this is going to continue, and the models show that we probably won't have a potential cool off until maybe the 20th of this month, if that trend holds up. So that's pretty far out. Despite the relatively warmer air here in southeast Texas, I mean, you can see it looks like we have like kind of a, I don't know if you'd call that an urban heat dome or something, but it's just specifically over Houston where we're getting like hotter weather, whereas towards northeast Texas, it's actually just a little bit cooler, really not much. But despite this, it actually has felt nicer here, because the biggest feature, honestly the most distinguishing feature about southeast Texas, if not the heat, is just the humidity. Because if it weren't for the humidity, the heat wouldn't be so bad. It sucks. I hate it. I've lived here all my life, and I'll never ever get used to it. But it has been lax lately. I noticed earlier the humidity was around 50 degrees, and it's been that way for the past few days, actually the past week. Last week when I went to work on Friday, not this past Friday, but Friday before, I noticed it was cooler in the morning, and it was still, it's still been actually record-breaking hot the middle of the day at the hottest points. It was still more tolerable. Like, I think we were getting mid-90s to lower 90s, but that wasn't like, I kind of thought, yeah, it's hot directly in the sun, but it's not really that bad. Like, you take the humidity out of there, and it's really not, it's more tolerable. This is a little evident looking at the dew point. There is a little dip here, so this air down here is going to be more like right about here is going to be more, it's going to be less muggy. I'm not certain on this, but I think this may have to do with a low pressure system in the Gulf, and that could be wrapping moisture out rather than bringing it into the coast like it normally does. This time of the year we have onshore flow usually, which brings in more Gulf moisture, but that low pressure system here is keeping that abdicated a bit, and so more northerly air, I guess you could say, not even really so much northerly air, is kind of dipping into, or rather honestly just what would be normal southeast Texas air if the ocean just wasn't right there. So that's nice. I like that. Unfortunately, that is going to change starting on Tuesday. It looks like we're going to start getting more muggy air, but it's kind of battling it. The more dry air is kind of battling it, and you can see on the 12th it actually gets pretty nice again. So we're kind of right on the battlefront, as you could say, here in southeast Texas between those two air masses, essentially. And then there's that just deluge of cold air that the model thinks is going to come in on the 20th. Let's cross our fingers and hope that actually does happen. That will be a blessing. So what about weather over the next 2 days? What is that going to look like as that cold front moves forward and that jet streak travels further east? So you can see that low pressure system moving forward. It goes into Minnesota and then brings the precipitation with it, going into eventually the plains, and that actually creates a squall line, which will potentially bring some severe weather to the plains and even the Ozarks on Tuesday. This will actually be tomorrow through Tuesday. This weather will be taking place in this general region. That front continues advancing and eventually it makes its way out to the coast, and then we won't be dealing with it anymore by essentially a week from now. This is triggering marginal convective outlooks for the regions that it passes through, but nothing considerable. And, this is not like a tornado event or anything like that, especially considering the time of the year. This is mostly just if it develops into anything further, it's mostly just maybe a wind hail event, strong crosswinds, straight line winds. Something to look for in local regions. If you do get caught in that squall line, things could develop further, so just keep an eye on it if you're in those areas. Looking at the general synopsis on the Weather Prediction Center, this is kind of what that looks like as it's moving forward. Mixed precipitation continues tomorrow through the Rockies as that cold front advances. It wouldn't be surprising if you see snow up in the peaks in Wyoming and Montana. And then precipitation is going to increase in the southeast and Florida, and maybe a little bit even along the Gulf coastal plains of Texas, because of actually an interaction with a warm front here in that low pressure system. And then going into Monday, October 6th, you can see that that frontal boundary there is quite long, elongated, and along that is where, as I said, you're going to see most of that activity. And in these areas specifically, going through the week, as this moves forward further east, you'll want to watch that as it moves that way, because depending on conditions and how they change present day, as we see a lot of the time with these features, sometimes at the moment they're happening, sometimes severity can change, and that's what triggered that mesoscale discussion here in Wyoming and Nebraska and South Dakota. So nothing too great to be concerned about, but potentially severe weather. Things can change as we go forward. The weather is pretty volatile. It can change. So just good to keep an eye on it. So to sum it up, we got some slightly severe, potentially severe weather moving east throughout the United States, but mostly pretty tame, and we're going to be dealing with some warmer than preferred weather going into October, and we need to look to most likely the 20th and beyond for cooler weather, which sucks. I know, I hate it myself. Within the next 2 days, I'll have a tropical update video, as there is some activity in the Atlantic currently. But that is all that I have for today. This is a pretty short video. I do hope that you found it useful, and again, consider subscribing if you like this kind of content. I deliver weather content frequently, actually now frequently, so it'd be good for you if you want a nice, friendly, relatable source of weather information. I also post storm chasing content, so that can also be interesting if you like that. Anyhow, take care, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you are the storm.